my talk. So we're going to talk about how we can use Slack and Python to basically reduce the load on our dev team and give the users who are no help some self-help. So to start off with a bit of a background, this is all about a project that I did a few years ago. I was joining a startup and I was the second developer hired on the team. Now, as we all know about startups, we need money coming in before anything else. So the product was launched before it was finished. That's not to say it didn't work. It worked fine. It's probably 90% of the way there. There was a bit of polish missing. But it did mean that, for example, there were some manual steps. And there was like any kind of bug reporting or feature requests who came from our internal users was just put in a Slack channel or a direct message to one of our dev team. There was no kind of process to follow, and it was a bit of a mess. But we got out in the market, that kind of thing. And that was what was important to the business people. A few of my team essentially said, we're trying to finish rocket ship after it already launched. So we needed to go back and figure out kind of a way to ease our ease how much kind of work we were spending on like support and maintenance, so we could spend more time on making features. Quick step back about me. Hi, Isaac. I'm a technical lead at Canopy Specialty Insurance. I am a Slack certified developer, although I think that has actually expired now, so I'm not sure I'm allowed to call myself that. And there are a few things that you can talk about with me in the pub later. How to sort any of those. Or this talk if you find it interesting, we'll see. So, before we kind of go through our journey and figure out where we ended up, it's always good to figure out where we started. So when I first joined the company, like I said, there were some manual steps. You'd have a message from a user saying, can you push some data from the test project one, but obviously the users don't really know how to spell stuff. So then you'd have to go back and say, I can't see that name, is this the name you mean? Because you don't want to push the wrong data by mistake. Then obviously they get extracted, and then 16 minutes later they come back and go, oh yeah, that is the one I meant. And I go, okay, brilliant. Now I can go away and do the work I need to do. That's taken however much time. Far too long than it should have taken. Now, at the time we were using ClickUp, not Jira, yay. And basically, after that we'd have to go into ClickUp, create a task to kind of document the work we'd done, and anything else that was relevant. This was really useful later on, thank goodness. So, what did this look like as a workflow? So like I said, user sends a Slack message to our channel. You then have this double check. You probably go, is the info correct? Probably not. So you have to go back and ask for more info, and you go around this cycle. Twice was really good. We had Slack threads of like 90 messages with lots of back and forth. And so anything we could do to relieve that burden was great. You then have to go and actually handle the request, and then, like I said, go into ClickUp and create that ticket. So this is what our workflow looked like. This was obviously not the pinnacle of engineering performance. So we had to sit back and we said, how can we automate this? Now, we knew ClickUp had an API, and like I said, around the same time, I was studying for my Slack developer certification. This was actually just an exam you did, and it was paid, but I joined the Slack conference that year, and you got one free entry, so I studied really hard, managed to get my certification. Within that, I learned lots about what we could do in Slack at that time. It's actually changed quite a lot. But we concluded that basically I was going to put together a proof of concept to automate this part. That's the bit we decided. Can we prove that we can connect Slack to ClickUp, and then maybe we can kind of take it from there and do some more interesting stuff. So, what automation options do we have in Slack? To start off with, there is workflows. This is a no-code solution. You can only use it on a paid Slack workspace, which obviously puts it on the bottom tier already, because we like to use free stuff. At the time, it was a lot less customizable. It's had a big overhaul in the last year or so. Now you can kind of add third-party provided steps, and you can do a bit more fancy stuff, but at the time it was literally like click a button type thing and to send a message, so we didn't really want to use that. Slack apps, that's what we're going to talk about today. You write the code yourself, you host the code yourself, but because you kind of do everything, it's then free to use, and you can use it on the free Slack workspaces. Then the last one is the new kid on the block. These are called Slack functions. You write them in TypeScript, and they are hosted on Slack, also can only be used on the paid plan. Now at the time, like I said, workflow was very much simpler, and custom functions, Slack functions did not yet exist. So we went with a Slack app. So what does a Slack app look like? To start with, there is the kind of API part. That's what most of it is. It's just a web API. You have you have a configuration part, so that's what you do on the Slack website. You basically go on there, you create your name. That's also where you control the authentication, so you give your app certain scopes, and you can get a token and secrets and things like that. Then you have the actual code part, that's the self-hosted part. Now the brilliant part of that being kind of up to you is that you have the freedom to use any technology or stack you want. You could write this in C or Java or whatever you want. But if you wanted to use JavaScript, Java or Python, Slack give you this package called Bolt. And what that does is that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so you can focus on the business logic part. So, how do we write Slack? To start with, obviously install the package, nice and easy. Then you go onto the Slack website, create a new app, agree that you're not going to do anything malicious, that kind of stuff, and then get your token and your secrets, obviously make a note of them. Then you're free to write some code, start getting something off the ground. But obviously, as with everything, the default kind of setup is not super production, it's just like big red letters when you kind of start it up. So what happens when I finally get around to actually deploying it? There's a wide range of options. To start with, you use the default adapter that's in Python, but yeah, like I said, every time you run the server, it shouts at you and says this is not suitable for production. However, within a few lines of code, you can turn it into a range of other apps that we're all familiar with, for example, Flask, Django, Fast API. And then at that point, it's just kind of plug and play. You put your Slack app into a request handler, turn it into a Fast API app, and then you can deploy that just like any other Fast API application. So, if you cast your minds back to about 3 minutes ago, this is what we were trying to automate. So how would we write some code to do that? So this is what a very basic Slack app looks like. At the top, you have your packages, then you create your Slack app. This is where you have to use your token and signing secret. Again, this is where Slack is really important because, or useful, because that handles a lot of like the making sure that the Slack request is actually from Slack and making sure that all your tokens and authentication line up. You don't have to worry about that. Slack Bolt takes care of that for you. Then we hook into this event called reaction added. So we were trying to automate, obviously, the ClickUp creation task. So, like I said, we'd get this message that says, hello tech team, I need some help with whatever. Now, what we decided to do was create this little custom emoji, which is called a React emoji in Slack, and give it the ClickUp name. So anytime one of the devs added this reaction emoji to a message, this would trigger this workflow. What it would do, first of all, it would double check that it's looking at the ClickUp emoji, and then if it was, it would go to use this task tracker class, which was just one I created to interact with the ClickUp API, and create a task from it. And this is what that looks like. Essentially, already we've gone into our support list, created a support task, put all the information we've got in there, and we've got this little permalink. Now the permalink ended up actually being really useful because any time that you kind of were onboarding new people or you were looking for a task to see like how it was done last time, you could find the task in ClickUp and click on this and you could see any kind of back and forth that was there as well, any more information. So this was stage one. This was our proof of concept to go, hey look, we can connect ClickUp and Slack together. So then after this we basically said, well, what's next? We're software developers, we have to be agile. I don't want to go on and do like a 6-month project at the end and nobody use it. So kind of what's the next smallest increment I can do? And this is what we came up with. So the first thing we did was we moved kind of where the interaction happens. So when you deal with Slack apps, there is a Slack app home. If you've ever used any Slack apps, you'll know this well. That's where like the Outlook app is where your calendar is with all your meetings. Hopefully it's empty for the day, we wish. And so we decided to move all the interaction there because that gave us a lot more control. Essentially, the rest of the flow was fairly similar. Slack would go and create a ClickUp task. Then you'd still have to have a little bit back and forth potentially, but with some more information and more handling from our side, it meant there was less there. And then you still have to actually do, handle the request. What did this look like? So this is the Slack app home on the left, and then on the right is the code. It's really simple. The first thing that kind of jumps out is this new act function. So anytime you are working with views, actions or options, you first have to let Slack know that you're happy with the request for various reasons we'll get into. The first thing we do is go, yeah, the request is fine, we're happy to deal with this, and then we're going to go away. We get some JSON that produces this view, this Slack home, and we publish it to our user. Now, this is one of the main reasons why I chose to use Slack for this automation and streamlining, because I was a Python developer. I didn't want to have to learn how to write front-end code, and that made this really easy. I could just write a bit of JSON that said type button, text, create new task. That was it. I didn't have to worry about React or JavaScript or HTML or any of that stuff. And that made life really easy. So here, obviously, we've got a little header and we've got a button. And it's very easy to add functionality. So here we have another view. So anytime we talk about views in Slack, that just means a UI element. So here we've got a modal, that is also a view. First of all, we acknowledge it, and then we get the JSON, pass it to the user. Now, this kind of achieves the same thing that the stage 1 did, because we're still getting free text from a user, but because it's within a modal and we have a submission event, what we can do is we can start running some validation. Now, this is kind of some toy validation to sort of prove that it is possible. The way this works is it gets the value and it says, is the value longer than 5 characters? Then great, it's probably descriptive enough. I don't want people just putting like a help, and that's it. That's not useful to me. And now here you can see another way that we use acknowledge. So if there's errors, instead of returning this is okay, we reply to the user and say this is not okay, there's an error. We pick the field and we put the error message against it. Or they have actually put a descriptive title, and then we go and create the task just like last time. So again, this has taken us even further. We've got some validation, we've got a central place to kind of interact with the user. I've really proven my project that was worth putting time and money into. So we had a chance to kind of really sit down with the team, and we said, like, how can we make the team better? What's kind of, again, the next big step we can take? And a large part of that, again, was like, what can we fully automate, or at least partly automate? And the easiest way to do this was to go back through ClickUp. So like I said, we had that support list. They were all tagged fairly nicely. So we went through there and we said, what are the top 5 things that we could look at? What are the most common things that are taking up our dev's time or our IT team's time? And how can we basically relieve that load? So this is the workflow we came up with. Again, starting at Slack home, this is our central kind of place. First of all, Slack gives us a way to fetch drop-down options, which we'll get into. This really improved the back and forth with the users, because basically don't give them a free text field where they misspell stuff, just say like, here are your options, pick one. And that was really helpful. So again, part of our client setup was there was a database table with our client names, our project names. So what we could do is we could just fetch that table and then put that in a drop down. So that way, there was nothing from us every time a client came. We didn't have to go and update some code, update a drop down. It would just automatically fetch up. Then the next step was actually, we've got Python. Python's the second best tool to do everything, as we saw this morning. So chances are we can at least get most of the way there. So the Slack app would try and complete as much of the flow as possible. Now there were a couple of instances where we felt happy enough to give the code free rein, and actually it would just do all of it. And at that point it would just let the user know, and then that was completely away from us, and it freed up our time. Or if it can't do all of it, can it do 80% of it? And after that point, is there something, could it get 80% of the way and then generate something for our devs or our IT team to kind of get them even further, so it's even less load and burden on them? And then at that point, we would actually have to step in. But the whole point is that it reduces context switching, etc. And this is what we came up with. We've got a nice little dashboard basically for the users. We give them set options and we go, look, here are some options, here are the most common things you want to do. If you still can't find what you're looking for, then yes, we suppose you can create a generic task. But again, we reviewed that every kind of 6 months, maybe not even that, 3 months, and go is there something that's popping up loads that we could kind of automate? So the first thing we did was this kind of refresh dashboard. This was entirely handled by Slack after this point. So we had a dashboard with some views, and it would refresh the data from the client every 6 hours. And usually this is fine because people do their work ahead of time, and then by the time it comes to their meeting with the client, all the data is refreshed. It's fantastic. But every now and then you get people who left it till the last minute, they left it to the day of, and they go, oh, I've done all the work, but now my data's still showing this morning's data, and I've got my meeting in 2 minutes. Please help me. And that would be, and then obviously our database team would then have to drop what they're doing and then hop on and run the refresh table command. So instead, we introduced this flow where basically they can go and they can select a client. Now, as I said, this fetches the client list directly from the database. So again, we had this database object, we got the user input, and then we go and generate these client options from the list in the database that are like the input from the user. And then the second step would then it would go away and actually refresh the tables, and then again, that's nothing to do with us anymore. Another flow we came along with was this access client. Now, we had a lot of new members onboarded, or we got a new client, so people need access to it. We had a Azure storage blob that needed access, and they needed access to the client data in the database. Most of that was already run by us. We'd get a user request to go, oh, I need access to this, and then we could write a little script. We were kind of happy with that part, but it would be great if they kind of didn't have to come to us. But we also didn't want them to be able to just go and access any client they want and go, oh, I want access to all of them. There had to be still some kind of supervision from us. So we came up with this two-step process. First of all, we got the client list. Again, didn't let them choose any clients that they shouldn't have access to. And the first part was send this, what we call an interactive message. So we'd get the user and we'd get the client name. Now this would be sent to a private channel in Slack, which only had access with our IT admins. And basically you'd have a big approve button. And then you'd get a message as the user, you'd go like, your request has been submitted, like don't chase us, you'll get another one when it's been approved. Please leave us alone. And when you're happy, obviously most of the time you were, because people tend to not try and access things they shouldn't access, you click the approve button and then it would automatically run the script. So instead of getting a message and then we'd have to go and run all the scripts and stuff, it was just a single button that said approve. Now, after we'd approved it, it goes and updates this interactive message. So again, we've not got back and forth between the admins, or have you done this one, have you done this one, because again, we want to reduce this load. Then, when you were happy, and obviously you click the approve button, it would very simply go to the database, run this, grant access request, update the message, and let the user know that they've been approved. The last little bit that we did was we had some kind of data promotion, so taking it from like a validated state into production. This was generally like a big SQL statement, but every client and project has some nuances and stuff, as we are. So first of all, they submitted the client and the project, and what we wanted to do was get them 80% of the way there, because we couldn't do it all in Slack, but hey, if we could kind of generate something, a generic template, then send that to a database channel that was private for only our database team, then they could add the nuances and tweak it if they needed to, but hey, that reduces their load, and again, they don't have users pestering them, they can just get to it as and when. And again, that would let the user know that it's been submitted, and they would have access to it when they need it. That's kind of all of the workflows I want to talk about. Everything here is actually available in a little Slack playground I wrote. This is a toy example of the real deal. So you can join the Slack playground, I'll leave it up in a second, and click the buttons, open up the modals, create some tasks in ClickView, and there's a link there and you can go and look at it. And you could be my real life users and go, oh, this is fantastic, look at how much I've not got to do. And yeah. Thank you very much for listening. All the code is in my GitHub and connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Adi. Now it's time for questions.
Are these slides going to be available after this?
I can make them available, yeah, sure.
Great, because our workflow right now is basically whoever pings me on Slack next. So yeah,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, no, that's where we were at the start of this, so
yeah.
no, fantastic. Yes, no, I can make these available, and I can, in fact, I can even put them in the repo with all the code as well, but I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thanks, that was good. Two questions. One, why don't the customers just raise the tickets in the ticketing system? And two, how did you test it? So do you have like a sort of dev Slack and a dev instances on these tools? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So yes, exactly. We had a Slack app. We actually had two Slack apps. We had our production Slack app and then our dev Slack app, which meant that we could essentially create we could set the tokens and permissions to only certain members. So we had a little function that ran at the start of the app home. You can find it. Basically said if you're not, you haven't got the dev team permission, you can't access the dev Slack app. So yeah, that was kind of the easiest way to really go and test it. Obviously we had some unit tests and stuff as well. But yeah, in terms of like actually on Slack in a production environment, we had that was connected to the, we had slots on Azure, so you could like do the not production slot would be connected to the dev one, so you could kind of test it in there before it went live. And I can't remember what the other part of the question was.
Why don't the users create tickets at the start rather than use Slack?
Because they were so used to using Slack, and we only used ClickUp internally, so they didn't want to do that, I guess. You kind of had, we had to sort of meet them where they were. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Is there something next?
It's a good question. I don't work there anymore, so I don't know. hopefully they've taken this and run with it. But I don't know. Hopefully, yeah, they've got a whole like array of buttons, and they never need to click the create, new task button. Yeah, don't know.
More of a comment really than a question. So, at my old company, we had a Slack channel that was called Bug Chat, and whenever anybody spoke about, people would go in there. As you say, you have to meet them where they are. People go in there, they post bugs. If you want them, like they can't all suddenly get a GitHub account like this, just infeasible. So they post in the bug chat, and then there's like a, I think it's like the GitHub Slack app, and you can turn a Slack message into a ticket. So that was very useful as well.
In the past, when trying to implement systems like this, I've had users who've refused to interact with any automated system. Do you have any recommendations for helping, not enforce is maybe the wrong word, but encourage users to use it themselves?
Yeah, it was very much carrot and stick. It was like, we appreciate this is kind of new, so which is kind of the staged approach. We were like, well, look, we've started kind of automating a bit of it, and then like, oh, actually, instead of posting your free-form text here, can you put it in this modal? And they kind of were okay with that. Eventually it got to the point of, this is how we do it. If you want our attention, you want our help, this is how you have to go about it. And no, they weren't very happy, but also they had meetings with clients and they needed their stuff doing. So yeah, that's tough basically was the answer eventually.
A follow-up question based on the sort of, you mentioned some people left stuff to the last minute. Did you see any sort of increase of this, of people, especially with the semi-automated bits where people just press a button and then it happens? Did you have to do any education to teach users about which bits were properly automated versus which bits they'd actually have to wait business hours for?
That's a good question. I'm not sure whether we ever explicitly said it. I think part of that came to the, if you remember, it was a two-stage approach about, there was a lot of messages sent to the user, so it's like, your request has been submitted and we'll let you know when it's approved. So they kind of get that instant feedback to know like, they're waiting, whereas for the more automated ones, it was like, the refresh dashboard is like, your dashboard has been refreshed, and they kind of had that message, so hopefully that was kind of enough feedback for them. I think they very quickly understood kind of which ones, when we were leaving things to the last minute about which ones got done instantly and which ones took time. A good question.
Where did you deploy this? Where did you run the code?
So we run this in Azure at the time. It was just as a, I want to say either as a container or just as a serverless function. I can't remember what I ended up doing. But yeah, basically it was just like if you remember when I talked about deploying it as a fast API application, it was just the same stuff. So just DevOps team did most of that. I kind of just, I pushed the repo and it was there. So, but yeah, no, it was somewhere in Azure.
Any other questions? Okay, we are on time. Thank you, Isaac.